Welcome to 20% Time, a podcast from the team at Titan, a web development consultancy that specializes in Laravel, Vue, React, Livewire, all kinds of stuff. My name is Dave Hicking, and as always, I'm here with my amazing co-host, Susanna. How are you doing today, Susanna?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? We need to switch it up. I mean,
We
I
should
always had the
switch it
same
up.
question and I
Well-
say the same answer. I need to think of something else to
Well,
say.
I don't want you to say that you're doing poorly. You know, like, I mean, you could,
No,
you
but-
could always feel free, but you know, I'm glad
Oh,
to hear
it
that you're doing
sucks,
well.
man. It sucks today. No, it doesn't.
No, it's
for next time I'll prepare something else. But it's good. I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's Friday, which it typically is when we record 20% Time because that's our 20% day at Titan. And I'm excited because today we are joined by another one of our amazing programmers at Titan, Shawn Jones. Shawn, how are you?
Pretty good.
Shawn, is this your first time on the podcast? I think it is. Right?
Yeah, first time ever
Wow.
on 20% Time podcast. Yep.
Well, I'm glad we're finally fixing that mistake. We've got Shawn. We've got you on today because we want to talk about I think a topic that's kind of near and dear to your heart for some of the
Absolutely.
things that you've been involved with inside Titan, but also outside of Titan, and that's mentoring, specifically kind of mentoring other programmers.
Yes.
So yeah, Susanna, I think you have a question that you want to start with.
Well, it's kind of, if this podcast is about all about mentoring devs, my question is, how did you get started with mentoring? Is it something you've always wanted to do, or is it just something that happened to you?
I think it's something that kind of happened to me. So in order for me to get deep into my mentoring game, it would have had to come all the way back to, I would say, my military experience. So a lot of folks know that I'm a veteran, and I served from '02 to '07, and I did a couple tours, and I think it kind of initially started there where you were just kind of put in situations and folks who could handle stress kind of like assisted other folks who couldn't handle stress, right? And so I think that's some of the things that I had admired. So like, of course, you have that initial sort of upbringing throughout your basic training and your advanced individual training, and even in your airborne school, right? There's certain periods during your training where you could fall, like basically have sort of like a mental breakdown, or someone else could sort of experience that. And we were always kind of taught to kind of like move as a unit. And that's something that I've always loved during those times. So even in when you're out of those training situations and you're into like regular, we call it regular army back then. So like you're just 9 to 5 army, you're going to your job every day. There would be these instances where you'd have higher ups. There would be staff sergeants, sergeant first class, and they'd have to mentor the younger soldiers, kind of keep them in line, keep them in check. And it's how you did it, right? And usually the folks who I admired the most are the folks who didn't tell you what to do, but they stood next to you and they showed you what to do and they did it themselves, right? So there was, for example, there's this guy. I mean, I've been out of the Army since 2007. That's like 14 some odd years. I still remember this man's name. His name is Sergeant Dory, okay? Like from 2004. The reason why I remember his name so much was because two things. He'd always call you hero. He's like, "What's up, hero?" Like he'd always address you like that, right? It was beautiful. And then another thing would be is if he ever had to correct you, he would never just reprimand you and that be it. He would literally say, "Hey, you got to correct this." And if you didn't correct it, he'd give you a second warning. And if you didn't correct it, then he would make an extreme sort of situation where like, "Hey, all right, look, every morning at 6:30, we're going to do this thing together." And so like one of the examples was there was this guy who was showed up to the unit. And this is back in like '03, '04. I say '03. And back then you had to have a clean pressed uniform, right? And you had to shine your boots. They don't do that now, but back then you had to. So you had to show up to the unit. You had to show up to the every morning, or I think at least on Monday mornings, you had to be clean pressed, ready to go to work because you had to be professionally presentable. And this dude did not. He's like, "Why am I doing this for a utility uniform? Doesn't make any sense." So, and of course, Sergeant Dory would come up and go, "Hey, fam, your boots ain't shine, your uniform's not pressed. Like, you need to get on it. You need to present yourself in a professional way. You're a soldier, da da da." Guy was not listening. And he's like, "Okay, fine." And he's like, every morning from here on out, after PT, because we wake up at 6:30 in the morning to do physical training for an hour. He's like, after PT, I'm going to bring my uniform up to the barracks. and I'm going to bring my boots up. We're going to meet underneath the tree, and every morning we're going to press our uniform, like iron it, and we're going to shine our boots underneath this tree. And no lie, this Sergeant Dory, who is a family man who had he's got 3 kids, he's got a wife. Usually they would, after PT, they would leave and they would go home. He'd have breakfast with his kids and wife, and then he'd come back and be ready to start work at 9. He brought his uniform and his boots in the car. So that way, after PT, they could go take a shower, and then they would underneath the tree every morning at 7:30, shining their boots together, pressing their uniform together, just so this guy can get right. Right? They did it for like 2 months. Wow. So it's just one of those things where like, all right, I'm never going to forget that sort of leadership. It's just by leading by example and just by being present. A lot of folks don't realize, they think like, hey, if I give you all the tools to be successful, then, you'll be successful. And that's not true. A lot of the times it's, you're showing up and you're being present, and that matters a lot more to people than what you think, right? And just by doing the thing next to them. So I think with that, I've always admired that. And in the case of any job I've had since then, not even Titan, but like before that, I think there was when I was working for a telecom company, and I eventually became a manager, and I had to go, and we were installing satellites, and I had to go and assist other folks in how to do certain jobs. I wouldn't just tell them what to do. I would be getting up on the ladder and climbing up. It's like, hey, this is how we do it. This is how we route the cables. This is where you want to drill into the home. This is where you want to do certain things like that. It's a matter of just, and if there's a late job, it's like, hey, well, I'm not going to go home. If you're not home with your family, I'm not going to be home with my family. I'm going to stay with you until we get this job knocked out. Then we're going to go home together. It's like that sort of thing, right? Yeah. So it's just the idea of just making sure that people don't feel like they're alone tackling a situation or a problem, and helping them get through it. It could be something as small as learning a small thing at the job, like, hey, I don't know how to do this loop correctly or work with collections or whatever. Or it could be something as big as like, I feel like I'm siloed and I need a buddy. Yeah. Right. And so it can manifest into different things. And it's just the key thing I always loved is just being present and being available.
I've got to ask, this guy, did he end up shining his shoes?
I can't remember the dude. I think he did. I think after a while he kind of got the gist of it, and he's like, yeah, you know what? Like, I think he took a little bit more presentation, like a little bit more pride in his presentation, so to speak. And so I think he, from there on, because like it went on for at least 2 or 3 months, and then I think after that he got the memo, and he started doing things by himself. And so, but yeah, and Sergeant Dory was always doing that. He was always leading by example. That's one of the things I always loved about him.
That's amazing. Yeah.
It's really interesting because, like, I think sometimes people associate that kind of mentorship, or, that kind of almost like not quite an apprenticeship, but, that kind of like really training up like the people who you're trying to help out, people who, you're trying to set an example. I don't know if people always associate that with the world of web development, right? Yeah. Like and it's interesting that kind of like, that's the background that's sort of like where you're coming from. That's what you're bringing to the table. And, you've done mentorship, like you said, at other places, but I know that outside of web development, well, not outside of web development, but outside of like your jobs, you've done work with Launch Code, right? Which is this nonprofit that helps people code and hopefully like get a job. How did you get to Launch Code, and like, how does that all work? Okay,
well, I mean, this is a crazy story. So I'm
good. We like stories, man.
Yeah. So rewind to 2011. I'm finishing up film school, right? So I did audio and film, and that was like my initial passion. And I meet this woman who ends up being my wife today, but we meet through Facebook, apparently through a mutual friend. And it was one of those things where she could joke and witty, and I can keep up too. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested. Like, who is this person? And I looked up to see where they were from, and it said St. Louis. And I was like, nah, right? And I was like, I'm not going there. I'm in LA. I'm trying to pursue this career. Like, that's it. And then, my friend ends up playing Cupid. He ends up getting us, linked up and everything. And I eventually end up like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just going to move to St. Louis. We're going to make this thing happen. So I end up moving to St. Louis, and there's no film industry here, no audio industry here. And so I had to kind of start over, and I started doing random odd jobs again. And 2 years after that is when there is an ad in the paper for this thing. It's like, hey, if you want to start a new career and learn programming, Launch Code is basically teaching programming for free. Right. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I literally leave work in my uniform, go down to the downtown. I think they met up at the Peabody Opera House at the time. There's 1,000 people of varying ages, and they don't even know how this program is going to work. They basically took the curriculum of CS50, which you can find online at edx.org, and they sort of took that in. It's like, hey, we're going to use this, and we're going to build pods, and we're all going to learn together and teach you the basics of programming. We're going to teach you C, and then ultimately with teaching you C, you can pick up like PHP, JavaScript, you can learn yourself. And so I do this program. I finish it up maybe 5 or 6 months, and I actually get placed. They actually place me in like a couple jobs, and I end up placing myself in one that I stay at for a good year. And I was so happy about that placement because Full Sail, when they take you in, they're like, hey, we're going to place you at a job, right? We're going to place you at an audio engineering job. And that didn't really happen because, they can't basically have a good outlook on different cities and things of that nature. They're only in Orlando, and I'm like in a city that's not Orlando. It's not a major city. So the outlook for placement in St. Louis of all places is not that great, especially with the connections, right? So that's not working for me. Los Angeles Film School had a similar program. Like, hey, once you complete this, we're going to place you, we'll keep you in the loop and place you in potential job opportunities. That never happened because I had to leave Los Angeles, right? So this is the first program that placed me not once but twice. They placed me at 2 different places to work after finishing their curriculum, and I was so moved by that I was like, oh wow, this place is actually doing like legit things that like I want to come back and help. So after 2014, I think I completed the program there. I get placed for a couple times. 2016, I come back and I start working as a TA, which is a teaching assistant. Back then they called it a TF, like a teaching fellow, but essentially they just kind of like they get a small group of folks. Because like usually the class is a size of maybe 200, and so they would it's huge, but like every year they get an application group of probably 15 to 1,800 people. They have to whittle it down to about 250 folks, and then out of that 250 folks, there's a main instructor, and then depending on the size of the class, there'll be X amount of number of TFs because they want every teaching fellow or teaching assistant to have 10 to 13 people. So the instructor would teach in front of the class every day, and then for like an hour, and then we would break off into these pod sessions where we would learn what our individual groups were about an hour and a half, and then we would basically coalesce back to the main group at the end to finish and exercise their assignment. And during that process, there's a lot of negative speak, right? There's a lot of, because as developers, we're working on things and we're like, oh, I don't know this tech, or I don't know this, or, we kind of get thrown into the situations where we're not comfortable. Well, imagine, you're 38 and you're starting your career over again, right? And you're learning after work, and you've got 3 kids, and you've got these situations where like you don't have, you're constantly thinking about your finances, and you're constantly thinking about, hey, is this program the right choice for me right now at this moment, right? So you're battling that. Then you're battling, hey, the technical aspect of learning, right? On top of that. And then you're trying to also battle like maybe the cultural fit. Hey, am I really going to fit into these new companies that I'm going to, right? Just so much of that. So that's when I realized during that teaching, during assisting with that, I was like, okay, yeah, it's not about the technical piece of this. It's about everything else. Because to be honest, people were understanding the logical aspect of it, but they were counting themselves out before they even finished the course. So like LaunchCode would bring in about 250 people. Unfortunately, around every class, we graduated around 100, 130 folks because folks just dropped out of a free class because they counted themselves out from something, Yeah. And so I realized at that point, I was like, I remember those times where I've got 3 kids. I don't have a job because at the time when I was learning LaunchCode, I wasn't employed. And, I'm learning after I'm laying my kids down to go to sleep, and I'm learning from 10 to 2 in the morning or something like that. And then I'm trying to get back up and take care of them. So I wanted to share my experiences with them to sort of reaffirm like, hey, look, I can do it. You can do it. It's possible. Hey, I fit in here. It's possible.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And just mentor them in that way, and give them a difference mentorship. Because I think a lot of folks too, traditional folks, they teach in like a college style where it's like, I give you a problem, go figure out how to do it, right? And one of my favorite teachers, I can't remember his name, but he was a high school math teacher, and I think he taught me like algebra 1. He would just tell you the answer. And I loved it. He would just be like, hey, yeah, you just do this. You do the 2 times 3 over this and you distribute it to X and da 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 da. And he would just walk you through and give you the answer. And I was like, that's wonderful, because it allowed my brain to eventually connect the dots and how to do the process. So that's how I taught, because I realized that's how a lot of people, that's what they needed. They didn't, they would just run into a wall and they would get stuck. And then they would try to go to their TF or TA, and the TA was kind of being like, well, you got this. You got all these pieces. Just go figure it out. And they would step away.
Oh yeah.
And you would just look at the person's face after that, and they would feel like, I don't belong here. Like, I'm not getting it. Negative speak. And so it's just like it was just happening. And then I would come over and be like, I would explain them the why, and then I would walk them through their problem, right? And then we would answer their problem together, and then we might even answer the next 2 together.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, all right, cool. I think you got it now. Come and get me if you got any more questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions, right? And so I think the need of having to, I think once I realized that I had sort of the skill set from the military, from prior things, from other teachers, and realizing that they needed this as well, and like they needed this particular type of style of teaching, I think that's where I just sort of started implementing it and started using it in everything at that point.
Yeah. I can definitely relate. Like, so many times I've had problem and people say, okay, you go and Google it, but if you don't know what to Google, it's really hard. Or if you don't know what the process, so if you read the code, just keep reading the code, you'll get it eventually. But how are you supposed to get it if you don't understand? And it frustrates me to no end. Like, this is not the way I work. I can't, and I don't learn this way. And it's really hard to find somebody who is willing to give you the answer without feeling like they're cheating or you're not trying hard enough. Like, but yeah, I can definitely, so resonate with that. It's like a flashbulb went in my mind. I was like, oh, that's what I need. That's why I struggle. How do you... Yeah, go on, sorry.
Oh, no, it's just like a lot of people think by not giving the answer, they're helping the person out. And there's an argument for that, for sure, right? Because you're also teaching resourcefulness. But if you can't get them past the initial idea of being resourceful, then they'll never attempt in the first place at all. They'll just never do it. Right. So
it's that tricky line, right? I mean, because you don't want to just give people, you have to like kind of like build them up, but also like keep them going. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I suspect that's behind what makes good teachers, right? And mentoring is not just teaching, but there is some teaching to it, right?
Yeah. I would say, like with Launch Code, I kind of say I'm not teaching you the subject, I'm teaching you how to learn.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think in that situation, it's kind of like, and I like anytime I was instructing a class, like, hey, look, I'm not teaching you Java, I'm not teaching you JavaScript, I'm teaching you how to learn it. So then that way you can go off and go learn something else, right? Yeah. I'm teaching you how to look at the problem. And I think you could still do that and kind of give them the roadmap to kind of give them the start. They'll develop the other things as they need it, but they need the launch pad first of how to do it, because you got to think about it. A lot of folks don't get it too. Like with Launch Code, you're taking folks who are like my age, like I'm 38, right? You're taking folks between that, maybe even early 30s, all the way up into their 60s. And the crazy thing is that we came from a different time of learning where it wasn't sort of like a, what do they call it? Creative core or common core, where like you have to figure out the answer. Like we just learned off of memory. You just told us what to do, and we executed, and that was done. And so I think in that situation, for those folks, I think we kind of have to lean into that style of teaching just for a little bit. Then they'll figure out the job, and they'll do everything else because they're brilliant-minded people, right? It's just that, hey, you have to sort of mold and wrap your brain around how they learn so they can get the gist of it. And it's, again, that leads back to the military. If you're in the basic training and they're teaching you something as simple as, hey, this is how you position and hold a rifle. They don't teach you one way. They teach you 3 ways. They teach you, they literally explain the entire thing from front to back. Yeah. Then right after that, they say by the numbers, where they teach you in steps. And then they give you time to actually do it yourself, like perform it, and they'll give you corrections. They did that for every piece of instruction during basic training. There's never one time where they're like, hey, this is it. Now you know it. They're like, no, they literally did those 3 ways just so if your brain didn't catch the straight up instruction, it might have caught it on the step by step. And if it didn't catch it on the step by step, it probably caught it when you were doing the actual full blown demonstration. Right. And if by then, if you didn't get it, now they're asking like, what's wrong with you? I taught it to you 3 ways. Right. They're probably yelling at you.
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? I taught you 3 ways already. So you should have this by now. So, and I think we have to do that for folks when we're mentoring them. It's like, they're not going to get it just because we explained it to them. They're not going to get it just because we gave it to them the way that how we learned. We have to understand that they're probably learning different, coming from a different place. And so if it's giving them the answer to eventually have them figure out how to develop it themselves in the future, awesome. If it's giving them space so that then they can cultivate it themselves, that's awesome too. It's another great tool, right? It's just a matter of who the person is and what they need.
Well, this is so. Do you still work with LaunchCode, or have you moved on? Or how do you find people to mentor, or how do they find you?
Anybody who leaves LaunchCode, I always give them my contact information via LinkedIn, so they can always come back to me and talk to me. Especially like after the learning aspect, it's like the career stuff, right? So.
Because learning doesn't stop once you finish a course. That's
exactly.
just the beginning. That's just the beginning.
yeah. So like it doesn't like, I mean, you got to learn how to navigate. How long should I stay at a job? Is this job right for me? Cultural stuff. What do I really want to do? Right. What do I really want to focus on? Like, do I want to, because maybe a lot of the times in that program, you're taught back end and front end. Do I want to solely focus on front end versus back end? Do I still want to be both? That sort of thing. Do I even want to be in this language at all? Do I want to switch languages? How do I do that? Right. So a lot of the times it's having those conversations with recent graduates. Other times it's I still teach when I can. I don't think I've taught since 2021 just because of just weird stuff that was popping up there. But with the new building that they recently erected, I'm hoping to go back and teach maybe at the start of the year and do another 6-month instructional class. But yeah, I think that's generally the case. And just being available, I think it's like usually I've always made myself available to answer questions and to, have those conversations with folks during the course as well as outside of the course. And usually a lot of the times the questions are like, all right, so what is this really? They're like, like, what is this tech world really like? Should I do this? Should I not do this? And a lot of the times it's, I'm just making sure that they listen to themselves because we're coming from folks who we've gotten so used to try to be valuable for the employer, right? That we don't listen to ourselves. And so I encourage them like, hey, if you don't like the job, fam, just say you don't like it and move on, right? Or if you need more money, you just need more money. Just say what you need and that be it. So
it's hard, right? Because if you're coming from either like you grew up this way or maybe your experiences so far as an adult, if you're coming from an environment where you haven't had good steady jobs and you finally get that one that's paying you a certain amount, like you think you get to that kind of like scarcity mindset where you're like,
exactly,
this is I can't, maybe they're not treating me well, but I'm making twice as much as I've ever made before. And it's hard to get out of that,
Exactly. 100%. And that's everybody that's going into that program.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so, I mean, and that was me, dude. I was so appreciative when I was making double. I was like, what? I'm making double word. Like, this is great. And then you realize like, I value, maybe I might value this or value that more than money. But for me, it's always a culture thing. I think I've reached a certain age now where like, it's not, I'm only making money to give it to the kids because they're going to steal it from me anyway. Right. Yeah. Like they need the Roblox, they need the fancy toys, they need the house. Me, it's like, if I could live a simple life, I would absolutely live a simple life, but they need the money. So I go get the monies. Right. But it's one of those things where, I value like a culture of a place, right? Yeah. So that's where I'm at now. And so usually when I'm speaking on Titan, they're like, oh yeah, this is what I got at work and so on and so forth. They're always like, oh really? And their eyes light up too, because we're all coming from those places where like there's just no culture there, right? Like service industry type stuff, type places. And they're like, word, you don't have to do this. I'm like, yeah, like this is great. Like this is great. So I think ultimately, like they're coming from stations like, yo, it is what it is with money, but I would rather have a place where like I can just be comfortable at working, And 9 times out of 10, that's what they're doing. Like the money's initially the priority. That once it steps away, it's like, all right, cool. Well, I don't really feel comfortable here, or I don't have this. And I'm like, all right, well then switch it up. Don't be afraid to switch it up. You're valuable now in this sense. So, you can move forward like this, And if you need anything, let me know. I'll reach out to folks and see if there's something out there for you. So
yeah, I think people need to be told quite a few times that you are valuable now. Like, not that they weren't before, but I think especially for people who change career later on in life, there's a lot of baggage that comes with that, like all jobs, all experiences, and then you decide to just start over again halfway, through your life with kids and responsibilities. And it's hard to not be too humble. You need to be humble, but not too much. Like, you don't want to be like, oh, thank you so much for this job, and I'm never going to leave because like I'm so grateful I got this job. You need to eventually believe that you are worth it now, and you can move on and you can look after yourself. You don't just have to be so thankful for other people giving you stuff because now you earned it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's. I remember feeling that way when I lost my job and I wasn't working for 4 months, and then when I finally got the new job, like you just have that comparison in your mind of like what life was with no money, or like you living on some sort of federal benefit for a bit, and then now you can actually sustain yourself, and like your brain is like, I don't ever want to go back there again, so I'll do whatever you want me to do to make sure I don't ever fall back down to that place. And so yeah, I can completely see it. And it's kind of the crazy thing of like, you do feel less valuable because of that, right? And so you'll talk yourself out of a good thing most of the time. And the funny thing was, it was happening with my wife, unfortunately. Like, she worked at the university for a long time as a research coordinator. She had several jobs over there. She'd been there for like 10 years. And, the pay for research coordination is not that great because it's nonprofit work most of the time. It's grant money, right? But like, if you were to switch to the for-profit sector, which is doing the same thing, you make double. But she was afraid to leave that situation just because, it's like, I do this type of research, not this type of research, so I don't know if it's going to transfer correctly. She wouldn't even put in the applications. Like, she wouldn't even apply half the time. And I'm just like, fam, just go for it. Like, it's no big deal. Like, you got it. Like, you've been doing, above and beyond for years. So this transition should be nothing for you. And I think it took her several years to like finally get in the mindset that like, yeah, I've got this value and I'm going to be able to go do it. And so we all experience that. And it's a crazy, crazy thing to come across, to have so much value and then not see it in yourself.
Can you talk a bit about sort of the two sides of like what you think a successful mentorship relationship is like, right? Because it's the mentor, but it's also the mentee, right? You have to be, you not only need somebody who's not just willing to be a mentor, but knows how to be a good mentor, but also you need somebody who's presumably willing to be mentored, right?
That's true. I think a good relationship is just like any other relationship partnership in your life, right? Usually it's 50-50. So like whether that's, a marriage relationship or friendship, a mentorship, menteeship, I think it's very, very similar in like there's a give and get from both sides sort of situation. So a lot of the times, and the give back to the mentor is you're performing the action that the mentor told you to do. Right. So a lot of the times the mentor's like, hey, if there's like you come to them and they say, hey, I'm looking for a new job, or I'm looking for this new switch and I don't know what to do, And the mentor's like, hey, well, there's this thing happening over here. You could go do this. You can do ABC. And the mentee's like, I don't think it's going to work for me. Well, then it kind of ends there, So it's one of those things where like, I can't really give you anything else to go off of or lead with if you don't want to exercise it. Right. So it's just one of those things where I think that's the biggest thing there, where I kind of tell myself this a lot because I do this, is like, I can't own it more than you. So if this is your career, this is your path, you have to be in 100%, right? All I have to do is show up for you, and I'm going to be in 100% too. It's like, I'm going to match whatever energy you give, right? But if I give you energy and you don't use it, then I can't really give you anything else because you're not implementing it. So I think a good relationship is a person who's willing to listen to the advice and implement the advice, and And then for the mentors, just kind of like be available to like, hey, if this thing doesn't work and we need to go a different direction, then, you maneuver and go that different direction. You help them out in that different way. If that person said, hey, this isn't working for me, the mentor doesn't just throw up their hands and go, oh, okay, well, that's all I got. Yeah, bye. It's like, all right, well, let's sit down, let's discuss it, let's talk about it, right? Let's walk through it. And then in that situation, the mentor's probably going to run up into something where like, I have zero resources for this, but maybe I've got friends that are in that area that can help you out, right? Mm-hmm. And I can keep in contact and touch and work on that side. And, but still, the mentee has to go and do those things for themselves, right? They have to go and assist and say, all right, cool. They told me to apply here. I'm gonna apply here. Or I got to apply to 3 places a day. Got it. All right, cool. I got to do this training for myself. Got it. I got to do these things and maybe follow up here. Okay, that's great. They have to kind of like follow through with the word. And I think it's that, as well as it also needs to be some word of a friendship as well. I think when you're mentoring somebody, I think like you got to also kind of be like a decent friend, right? Like just talk about things that are not work. Or talk about, just because you can build that sort of bond. Because like, I think that also motivates the person to be like, oh, this is a close friend of mine. I don't want to let them down, so to speak, and they're helping me out. So let me do that too. And if I think that's a good look what their relationship's going to be, right? So
let's say you've got a good version. So you've got a mentee, mentor. How do you evaluate their growth then? So is there something specific you look out for as they progress through, the learning of whatever it is they're learning? Is it like their attitude, the speed they learn, kind of questions they ask? What do you look out for?
Crazy thing is I don't really evaluate their growth too much. This is going to sound nuts, right? So the reason why I don't evaluate their growth is because I myself, as a person who I'm growing in different ways. I'm not necessarily growing in a technical way every day. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I'm pretty technical. I think I know my job pretty well, and I think I'm growing in that direction. But I don't think I was doing that day after day, week after week. I think I hit plateaus there, and it pauses. And then as I get thrown something new, I think that's when I grow. Mm-hmm. So my growth in that one particular category probably won't change for 6, 7, 8 months, right? I might be doing the job fine. But I was growing by assisting other folks and helping them in that light, right? I was growing by, maybe dividing up tasks and doing things that way, right? So I think with mentees, I think when you're guiding them, I think the only way I evaluate is how they look at the situation. Like if they're able to look at the situation with a little bit more confidence, I feel like I can assess that they're growing there. Yeah. If they're able to look at, if they're more comfortable with jumping in head first, because a lot of times they're skittish, mm-hmm. right? So if they're able to jump in head first in a situation that they're not very familiar with, I think there's growth there in that. And if not, I think that's what I'm going to fix first. Because I think
attitude.
I think the attitude is there. So I think it's like, all right, cool. If you're not positive thinking about yourself, then I'm going to ask you why. And then I'm going to reassure you that, no, you have it. Right. And then from there, unknowingly, that's the fire starter for you to like jump and do all the things. Right. So in the technical aspect of it, if you have it, if you don't have it, you're going to get it. Right. Because there's only certain folks who want to do this type of work. So, like problem solve on a daily and learn new tools on a daily. So the minute you say you want to be a programmer or you want to be in this field, I don't like try to be like, hey, do you have it or don't have it? I never look at it like that. I kind of like am like the cook in like Ratatouille. I'm like, everybody can cook, I'm like, well, everybody can code, right? So I think you got it. And my mentorship is more so in the lines of, I'm going to make sure that you feel confident that you got it. And anything that's a technical piece that you're missing, we're going to make sure that you have that. Because again, it's like once you do it once, you kind of understand it. You can replicate it. And then it's going to be up to you, again, to take that responsibility and to say, you know what, I don't understand this the way I want to. Let me dive into it a little bit more and figure it out for myself. Right. That's on every individual to do. So my idea is just my view of the mentorship is just to make sure that you feel confident doing it, and if you don't, why, and let's fix that. And so as long as you are growing in that area, I think that's probably the only measuring piece of growth that I'm like, that's like alerting to me that I'm evaluating and that I'm fixing, that I'm addressing.
I think, again, when you say that, you got it, like, how do you know that I have it? Because often people say, I know you can do it, you can do it, but how do you know? How do you know how do you know I'm good enough, clever enough, how do you know I can code? Because you don't know. If I don't know, how do you know? What would you say to that? Because I personally struggle with, like, how do I know I've got it?
I would say the minute that you don't give up, right? Like the minute you don't have a mental breakdown on something, right? But like, and that's because, like, tell me one developer who went into a technical piece and they knew every bit of it. Like, we get clients at Titan all the time, like, we don't know every bit of it. We have to, who have to pause and maybe devise a plan, a solution, and then look it up and make sure that's the path to go before we do it. Like, very rare are we in situations where we're like, oh yeah, I know everything from A to Z, right? And I'm going to map out everything from A to Z. We're problem solvers in the moment, so to speak, right? So I don't expect any particular developer to be like, I think it's normal, actually. I think it's very normal for you as an individual and as a developer to say, oh my God, I don't know. And how am I going to figure this out? The fact that you're asking those questions, perfect. That's why that's the best place to be. If you're not asking those questions and you think you know everything, that's scary for me. Yeah, So I think in that sense of, I think the fact that you're not giving up, and I think the fact that you're troubleshooting says that you're going to be okay. You know what I'm saying? Like the person who gives up, that's the person where I'm like, okay, I don't think they got it. They're bowing out early for no reason, right? They're just not showing up. But the person
I like
who's
this. This is like my therapy session. Come on, keep talking. I like this.
So I think the person who shows up every day, who's willing to look at a problem and troubleshoot, and really says, "Hey, I don't know the answers. I don't have the answers," who's willing to answer and say, "Hey, please help me." You're there.
I got it.
And that's
you say I've got it, then I must have it.
You got it.
Shawn, I'm going to take this in a slightly more cynical, self-serving
Please do.
For a second. No, because, I'm sure, I'm not saying I'm thinking this. I'm saying I'm imagining somebody might be thinking of this and listen to this, and maybe they're having a stressed out day and they're like, I mean, what am I, the potential mentor? What am I going to get out of mentoring? Right. And I like, Shawn, to hear you tell your story and hear you so far on this podcast and just knowing you, I feel like you have, like, you want to, I don't know if it's give back, you want to pass it along, you want to help people. But what do you think are the positive benefits aside? Like, what are some other positive benefits for folks who are thinking, should I be a mentor? Because it's a time commitment. It's a life commitment. It's a thing, But we think it's good. But I mean, beyond just, you should do it. It's good. What are some other reasons why people might want to be a mentor?
Outside, this is very hard, right? So outside of, like, what is a personal benefit of this? I
know it's so cynical. I'm so sorry.
But no,
why did you do
it?
Why did you even bother?
For my drive, I can only really speak to my drive and the reason why I do it. The place where I was before getting this sort of assistance, and I feel like in this day and age, we've been kind of left out to dry in a variety of different areas of our lives, right? Particularly in America, like, there's a lot of folks out there with student loan debt, right? That hasn't really been answered for. There's a lot of things where we try and go for the job and we think, oh, this job is going to be what it is, and it's not. And I've often ran into situations, again, where, like, some organization or some person is like, hey, we're going to give this thing to you, or it's going to be like this, and it's just not, right? And so, and it burns you in so many ways that, you eventually, like, thinking, like, no one's out to help me, no one's out to be this. So for me personally, it's just to give that experience that someone's always going to be there for you. There's, and Dave, you're absolutely probably right. There's no reward for this in a sense. It's like, for me, it's like the reward is like, I'm just happy to see other people happy, and I'm happy to see people in a better situation than where they were. And I'm happy that I could assist. But that's me. I understand that other folks, they're like, yo, that's not enough, fam. I need money. You know what I'm saying? I need some sort of compensation. Or it could be like this, that, and the other. Me, I don't care. It's like, I'll help for free most of the time. I mean, of course, I was getting paid for launch code. And I was like, it's a plus. But it's one of those things where even if someone approached me on the side, as long as they were a mentee who wanted to soak up the information, who wanted to do the all the work that they could, and they just needed some guidance here and there. I'm a huge person who just doesn't want to see you fall in a hole anywhere and get stuck. So, but yeah, the commitment is huge. The benefit is just, it's weird. It's sad. It's just like, it's just seeing the community in a better place than where it was. Yeah. Right. Unfortunately, like that's a plus for me. Speaking particularly in St. Louis and with Launch Code, if you think about it, they've placed close to maybe 4,000, maybe 5,000 people. Right. Mm-hmm. So that takes 4,000 to 5,000 people out of service industry positions and puts them in programming positions in corporate companies somewhere in the city, right? Now that's 5,000 openings for positions that can be filled by other people who need them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a benefit, which means now that's more people working, which means now that's an improvement on the city, right? So it inadvertently helps the city, which then means now if the city is in a better place where it's able to grow and support itself, that means I've got better neighborhoods for my kids to grow up in. Like, so I'm a huge proponent of like, cause like I used to study music. It's like, if you get the note right in the measure to fit the time signature, to fit your piece, it makes the score sound so much better. Right. And so it's the same thing. It's like, if I can get, this one person here is like, it's just one person, but if I assist them and get them to a place where everything is good, it inadvertently helps maybe 3 or 4 other people, right? And it helps the things around it. It comes back to me somehow. And I think that's the true piece of, like, that's what I believe, like, mentor. It's going to come back to me. Yeah. It's not for free. It's going to come back to me in some place, shape or form in the future. And I think that's going to be the real true benefit payoff. And the great thing about that is like, now when I go to like maybe like a soiree or something like that, or I go to like a meetup, it's like, it's a positive experience meeting different people and like hearing them, because I share and they know that I'm teaching and stuff like that. So it's like you get like minds together and you're able to build more things because of it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the benefit, is seeing that happen and being a part of that.
You're changing lives. I mean, no reason to just go around. You're changing lives. You're changing people's lives for the better.
That's the win. But I mean, if you need something more tangible,
well, I think there are other. I mean, there are other, like, that's not, I don't know if the cynical or sort of a cold, calculated way. Yes, I'm playing the role of cynical Dave today. No, if you have a company that has developers on it, once you get past a handful of devs, you've got some devs who almost certainly could use some mentorship. Now, whether you're in the position to do that or maybe you need to help facilitate that, mentorship will help your company, will help your team, right? Absolutely. If you are at all, on the separate note, if you're at all concerned about, or you want, concerned about the incoming pipeline of like new devs into the industry, whether you want to improve, if you want to see a more diverse group of devs, if you just want to see more devs in general, if you want to build that up, mentorship is a very crucial piece to that. Like, even if you personally aren't swayed by the sort of communal, like, this is great for the community, this is just great for the world. Like, it could be really good for your business. It could be really good for your industry. Like, it's just good.
Yeah. Because you're like, even in those situations where it's internal to the company, you're developing a culture that never dies. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think it rolls over, and it actually doesn't even depend on you. Like, one of the cool things, for an example, is every class in Launch Code I was teaching, I would throw out to say, hey, Code Till Dawn, which is a meetup in St. Louis, like, hey, Code Till Dawn starts from 7 to 12. You can come up, we can work on your assignments together. We'll have a few of the classmates show up after hours, and we can do that there. They do that now without me, even though I started doing that as something 4 or 5 years ago. And I think it's wonderful. So now every time even if I'm not teaching, I can show up to the Code Till Dawn meetup and meet current Launch Code like applicants working on their stuff, which is awesome. So just to be in, like, to do that maybe inside of a company and develop that for your culture, where you're doing particular certain things, like, it could, be something that just is baked in and you don't have to think about.
Well, all right, Shawn, we are almost at the end of our time here. But before we go, I wanted to ask, is there anything about mentorship that you wanted to touch on real quick that we didn't get a chance to talk about today? Some part of it that we didn't ask you about, or something specific you just want people to have as a takeaway?
be real about being a mentor. If you can't do it, then don't. And that's okay. And, because it's going to affect, the people you're involved with and everything like that. So like if for some reason, if someone says, hey, I want to link up and I want to, do this, that, and the other, if you just don't have the time or if your heart's not in it, or if something rubs you the wrong way about the individual, it's okay to say no. It's okay to be like, hey, I don't have the time. I'm sorry. You could point them in the right direction. And don't think just because, you're a senior at a company or you're some sort of high overarching individual somewhere that you absolutely have to mentor people. If it's just not in your skill set to do it, then just don't. If you don't have the love for it, then don't, so I leave with that.
Yeah, I like it because like kind of feels like everyone should be a mentor to pay it forward in a way. But I suppose not everyone should be a mentor. Like there are people who would be better mentors than others, and you shouldn't feel the pressure to be one just because you are in this industry, or like you said, because you are a senior, or because you've been mentored by somebody else. Like there are people who would be good at it, and there are others that might not.
Oh, and also don't worry if you don't have the title. If you're a junior and you want to help somebody out, help somebody out. Like, I think a lot of the assistance comes from folks at the same level as opposed to top down. So if you think you got it, just do it. And if you don't, then don't.
Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great. For folks who want to learn more about you, find you online, where should they go?
GitHub, Twitter, I think Dark Boy Wonder at those locations. If you want
one day I'm going to ask you about the origins of that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Dark Boy Wonder on Twitter, GitHub. It's a sound reference. I'll fill you in later on that one. And then on Instagram, I am just Shawn_Jones on Instagram if you want to follow me there too. So.
All right. Shawn, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you for the therapy session. Really enjoyed it.
No problem.